Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover, and I'm here to do a little bit of like a life update, a catch up and my June wrap up, as it has been about 4 or 5 weeks now since I actually filmed anything, and life has been a little bit crazy and busy recently, which is why I haven't actually been able to have the energy or the time or the space to sit down and film anything. So yeah, just a little bit of a catch up, and then I'm going to tell you about all the books I read in June. So this might be a little bit of a long wrap up, so maybe you want to go and get a cup of tea or something and come back and we can catch up. So basically at the start of June, myself and my partner, we bought a house. So we have now moved. I have the same bookshelves but like different books on them, as you can see, because my bookshelves have now moved into a completely different house, a different room, and yeah, so things have been like exciting and stressful and crazy. So yeah, so we were in our house, we love it. It is a house that is older, it's about 50 years old, so there's some bits and pieces that we need to do with it. Now it was thankfully left in a really nice condition by the previous owners. They've lived in it since it was like a new build, and they raised their family in it and they had a lovely life in it, and so yeah, we've definitely inherited a house full of lovely memories and just feels really warm and cozy and feels like our home already. But there's definitely some things that we want to do with it to make it a little bit more modern and updated and stuff. So at the moment we are basically living downstairs in the house. I'm in like the sitting room, which is also our bedroom. We are sleeping on a mattress on the floor for the foreseeable future, until we can get upstairs done, because it is basically just wallpaper stripping, carpet being taken up, things being dismantled. So yeah, things are just crazy, and trying to do that at the same time as like working full time and working from home, and yeah, getting all those things done is a little bit crazy. Yeah, I have had time to read, thankfully, just not a lot of time to actually sit down and talk about what I was reading. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to do a bit more vlogs and stuff and kind of show you my new home. Maybe eventually do some like before and after shots. That'll be really fun. I have a whole room, I have an attic that is going to be a dedicated library, so hopefully like sometime next year I'll have my own library. It'll be my filming setup, it'll be my reading space, and hopefully it'll be like, if my plans, my idea for it come true, it'll be a really gorgeous place to be able to, yeah, to sit down and read and show off all my books. And yeah, just something I've always wanted my entire life, just a room dedicated to my books and to reading. So yeah, I'm very excited to eventually get all those things done, but it's just step by step, and for the moment we are just enjoying our new home and all the challenges and fun that brings. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you as well about just some of the books that I was reading in June. I didn't get to do a June wrap up at all, so a lot of these books are kind of like all the books that I read in June. I had some really great books that I read, some middle of the road, and then some quite low books that made me really angry as well. So I'm going to talk about them now, and that's The Guesthouse by Abbie Frost, and this is I think this book, yeah, this book I picked up for the Buzzwordathon, and this is a thriller book about a girl whose boyfriend died and she is still grieving the loss of him, and she ends up going on this holiday that they had booked together. They'd originally meant to go as a couple, and now they're broken up. She's feeling really guilty over his death for like a myriad of reasons. She's going through a lot in her own life. She's a little bit of like a tragic mess, which is, as we all know, is a little bit of a trope that we see in these thrillers. And she goes to this house in kind of like a B&B, Airbnb setup in Ireland, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. She has a like kind of a mild family connection to this area, but she doesn't really have any plans of like what to do. She's just kind of going to get away. And when she gets to this house and she meets some of the other people who are also staying in this B&B along with her, she starts getting on with them a little bit, but then all these like creepy things start happening in this house, and there seems to be something going on, and then someone ends up dead, and eventually it kind of seems like the people are like being killed off one by one, and yeah, things just kind of go a little bit crazy. This one was just, it was one of these ones where I thought it was going to become a haunted house story, or it kind of seemed like it was going along that route of being a haunted house story, and I was like, ooh, okay, this might be really good, this could be really fun if that's what it is, and it's not. It didn't end up being that, and a lot of the reasonings and a lot of the things that happened were just silly and stupid. The main character was incredibly annoying, incredibly stupid. None of the characters were supposed to have kind of this bond. They were like helping each other out. They were all staying in this place, and I just didn't feel anything between any of them. Like, yes, they were all kind of virtual strangers to each other, but as they were like flung into this weird situation together, there was still nothing really there. And then I also really didn't like Basically, there would be a content warning in this for sexual abuse, and particular the sexual abuse of a child, and that is used as a plot twist in this book, and I really did not like that. I did not like that being used in a certain way, and I feel like the way it just was like ended up being flung into the story was just, it was just a little bit distasteful, I think. And I actually think that there could have been people who could be really triggered by that kind of content and something being like just flung into the story like that, and being used as a plot device in such a way. So yeah, I just really disliked this book, to be honest. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars, and I wouldn't really recommend. Unfortunately, things didn't get that much better, because I ended up reading a book that I really thought that I was going to love, and I ended up being really disappointed in it, and that was These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. And this is a book that I've heard loads about. This is a book that's kind of a historical fantasy book that is set in it is set in China in the 1900s and like the 1920s, and we are following Juliet and Roma, who are basically the heirs of 2 rival gangs. So this is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, except it is set in China. There's a little bit of a fantasy kind of supernatural element in this book, because there is this creature that seems to be killing people and infecting people, and it kind of seems to be like of a supernatural nature, and Juliet and Roma end up having to work together to try and figure out what is going on, who is killing the people of Shanghai, and is there like anything they can do to stop it. They kind of have to kind of work together despite their family's hatred for each other, and through that they end up getting a little bit closer. They do have a past that they do kind of have to confront, and they start working together basically to try and figure things out. Now there's a lot more going on in this story. One of the things I really liked about this story was the fact that there's a real gaze upon colonialism in China at the time, and how the real monster of the story is not the actual physical monster that we are seeing and that's being talked about and that's infecting people. The real monster of the story is actually the white men that are coming in and starting to close off bits of the city to its actual inhabitants, and starting to really treat like the Chinese people and Asian people who have like lived generations in this city and belong to the country, and how suddenly they're not like allowed in certain places in their own home. I really liked how that was kind of explored in this book, and I thought it was done in a really nice way, where it wasn't like in your face either. It was just kind of a really subtle thing in the story, and I just really enjoyed that. However, the main characters, Juliet and Roma, I just found really bland. I just didn't really care about them. I don't really know why. I just didn't really care about the story itself. I found it a little bit boring. It dragged on in places. I think this book was just that bit too long, and as well I think the side characters completely outshone the main characters. I think the writing in this, like, there's so much potential in it, and I would definitely watch out for more that Chloe Gong brings. Now this book will have a sequel. I don't know if I'll pick it up or not. I don't know. I'll wait and see what I hear about it. But yeah, this one was just quite disappointing for me, so I gave it a 2.5 to 3 stars. And the next book I read was probably one of the most frustrating, upsetting books I've ever read in my entire life. And if I was not reading this on my phone across the room, I would have fucked it into the sea. I would never have wanted to, like, oh, if this was a physical book that I was reading, God help it, because it would have gone into the bottom of the sea. It would have been the heart of the ocean. It would have been flung back in there. Yeah, so this was Skin Privilege by Karin, which is the final book, so I think it's the 6th book in the Grand County series. And if you've been following my wrap-ups for a while, you'll know that I've been reading through this series, and I've been quite enjoying it. It's kind of like this really violent, gritty thriller series. We are following 2 main characters, Sarah and Jeffrey. Sarah is county coroner, and she's also like the local paediatrician, and she helps out with murder investigations and trying to solve them. And her kind of ex-boyfriend / current love interest is Jeffrey, who is the police chief. So they end up having to work together, and they're flung together on loads of different cases to try and like solve these murders and these like serial killers, and a lot of it is really gritty. It's very not for the faint-hearted. I don't think anything Karin Slaughter writes is ever good for anyone who needs any kind of like content warnings, because like, think of a content warning and she probably has it in her book. So yeah, I have really enjoyed like the ups and downs of this series and the on-off relationship between Sarah and Jeffrey, and it's always kind of really exciting. And one of the things I love most about this series is that you just get so gripped onto whatever mystery is happening, whatever is happening in the book. And yeah, anytime I picked it up, I just could not put it down until I finished. So they're always really quick, engrossing, fast reads. This one was probably one of the weakest of the lot for me, just because one of the main characters we were following is Lena. She's kind of a side character throughout the series. She's probably one of the most annoying characters in the series because she just does a lot of things wrong all the time, and she ends up dragging a lot of people into her shit, and that's kind of what she does in this book. And Sarah and Jeffrey end up being dragged into something that's very serious and end up having to help her out. She's been accused of murder. You know, she seems to be on the run. They don't know what's happening, but they're trying to basically help her get out of it and try and see who actually killed this person who she's been accused of killing. So yeah, that was fine. There was a lot of foreshadowing in this book for something that was going to happen, and it foreshadowed and foreshadowed and foreshadowed, and I was like, okay, like I really feel like this really bad thing is going to happen. And I was like preparing myself for it, and I was okay, got to the like the very last page, and I was like, oh okay, like maybe this isn't going to happen. Last paragraph, literally the last paragraph of this book, the worst possible thing ever like that could happen happened. It was actually so traumatic, so distressing. I yelled out loud. Like I was just gobsmacked that like she did that. The last page of the last book of the series, she went and did that. And yeah, if you've read this series, if you've read this book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is a spin-off series, and like while I'm so mad at her for doing what she did, like I have the first book of the spin-off series on my phone already waiting for me to read it, so I will continue reading her books. I will probably end up reading all of her books, but God, I hate her. I hate her for doing what she did, but god damn it, she does write a good story. So yeah, this was a 2-star for me just because of that ending. Just you got to that very last, it probably would have been like a 3-ish, 3.5 star for like the overall story, but then the last bit, that last page, dropped it down to a 2-star because I just could not cope with it. I was just so emotionally distraught by this book. It was a 2-star rather than like, you know, like emotionally distraught can go this way or this way, and for me it went this way. It went down to a 2-star rather than up to a 5-star. And yeah, so if you've read this book, I would please love for you to like message me or like leave any comments down below. Maybe like just put spoiler in the comments just so other people, if they don't want to be spoiled, just put in your comment if you ever want to discuss like what happened in this book. But yeah, oh, what an ending. This, I will never ever forget the ending of this book, that's for sure. And the next book I finished was actually an audiobook that I had from NetGalley, and that was You and Me on Vacation, which is also called People We Meet on Vacation in the US, I think. And this is by Emily Henry. I have read other books by Emily Henry. I read like her very first, like her debut novel, which was a YA kind of sci-fi-esque book. But I haven't actually read her adult contemporary books that she read. One of them, which was Beach Read, which came out last year, I think, and people really loved that one. So there was a lot of hype around this book. In this book we were following two people, Poppy and Alex. They originally met when they were in college and they became really good friends, and we were basically following them. We're getting like the present day, and then we're flashing back to past summers they've had together. So basically every summer they kind of took a holiday together, and they're best friends. It's very clear that they are also in love with each other, but like nothing has ever happened. They're just like really close with a lot of sexual chemistry between them. So we are following them between all these summers and then this current summer that they're on, where something happened a couple of years previously. They didn't talk for a while, and now they're kind of on this kind of make or break holiday, really, in a way, where it like this is where their friendship will get back on track if they want to stay in each other's lives. And this was fine. I've seen loads and loads of people rave about this, and people were saying like how it made them cry and how like, you know, it tore their heart out. And I really thought that we were going to get like a cancer storyline at some point in this book. We don't, which I think is a good thing. Like, I don't know if that would be a spoiler for people to say that no one dies. No one dies. Just like, I just thought it was two people who had not many reasons not to be together. like that were just like dragging it out a lot, that they weren't together but they should be together. And like that works in some books, and there's always loads of books where like there is that one person, you know, that's the person that the characters are going to end up with. There's never any doubt in this book that like they're in love with each other. They're always in love with each other. They're always there. Like that is not a spoiler. That is what this book is about. But it was actually just borderline annoying that they weren't together, because I just couldn't see any point of them not being together. And it just felt like a massive amount of time wasted that they weren't together. And then like Poppy was very much a type of like, I'm not like other girl. I wrote in my review where I kind of felt like even when you were reading about them, you still felt like you were kind of the third wheel. Like there were times where it was like borderline just like awkward, I felt, reading about them, because I felt like so much of a third wheel. I felt like I needed to take a step back and just like leave them to do whatever they wanted to do, like on a few pages, and I'll come back, you know. Like it just felt a bit like that, and I just got bored of the story, because I was like, why is this dragging on so much? Like just get together, like it's not that big of a deal. My star rating for this, I had it originally as a 3-star, and I actually dropped it down the other day. The more I thought about it, I dropped it down to a 2-star, because like it was fine, it just bored me, and I just whatever other people got from this book, I did not get. Then I read a few books for the Queer Lit Readathon, which was a really fun readathon that took place in June, and the first book I finished for that was Quick Bright Things Come to Confusion by Mary Pagones, and this is a book, I read the first book in this series, which is called Fortune's Fool, a few years ago. This is basically a horse boy series, so we are following a character called Simon, who is really into horses, and he wants to be like a competitive eventer. He wants to be like that, he wants that to be his job. He wants to event horses, dressage, show jumping cross country. That's what he wants to do for his career. And in the first book we find him, he gets this horse that he wants to kind of rise up the ranks, and then he gets to a certain point with that horse, and then in this book he has travelled to Germany. He's moved to Germany to basically be an apprentice for this big stable owner. I really love the book. Like it's so horse focused. You have to know horses and you have to know the horse world to get on with this book. You can't be a complete novice when it comes to horse riding. Going into this book is like, it's self-published, it's specifically written for people who love horses, who event horses, who ride horses. You have to know horses to really understand everything that's going on in this book. I've been so immersed in the horse world. I love how dedicated Simon is to his craft, how good he is. He's kind of almost good at everything, which can be a little bit annoying, and he's also extremely arrogant at times, and he kind of looks down his nose at people who basically can't devote their entire life and every single bit of their time to horses, which is just, you know, realistically a lot of people don't have that upbringing where they've always been around horses. They might love horses, but they might have to do an office job so they can keep a horse, or, you know, spend time with horses. That's just normal life, and Simon doesn't really understand that, and that really bugged me, because I obviously would be the type of person where if I was to ever get a horse, I would have to work really hard to spend time with my horse, like at the weekends or at the end of the day. I would not be able to devote every single bit of my time to my horse, because otherwise I would not be able to afford it. So that kind of thing annoyed me in the book, and there's a lot of things that happen off page in this book, and a lot of time goes past very quickly, and sometimes I kind of wanted it to slow down and just savour the moments in the stable a little bit longer, and for the story not to fly by really quickly. And it also has this thing where I see it in a lot of self-published books, when an author will like have a character mention things like, you know, a band or a movie or books and things like that they're reading, or things that they're interested in that are in our world. So in this, the character, he's really into Brandon Flowers. There's a point where he's reading the Scorpio races, which I kind of enjoy because that is like a fantasy book about horses, so I kind of like that inclusion in. But things around like, you know, Brandon Flowers and stuff, like I didn't care. Like I don't give a shit if he likes Brandon Flowers, and I just think there was a little bit of too much of that, like what song he was listening to. I don't care what song he was listening to, so there's a little bit of that in the book. So I really enjoyed this series, and I'll definitely be reading on, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. And yeah, if you're really into horses and you just love books that are about horses, I would definitely recommend this. So yeah. And then after that I picked up Mr. Loverman by Bernadine Evaristo. This is a book I've been wanting to read for a really long time. I think I initially, probably a lot of people as well, initially saw Jen from Jen Campbell. She read this a while ago, and she used to say that Barry from this book lives in her heart. He's like one of these characters that lives in her heart, and I loved that description of a character who you just got on with so well, they now live in your heart forever. So I've been wanting to pick it up since then. And this is a book about a man called Barry, or Barrington, and he is married. He's been married for a very long time, but he is not in love with his wife. He actually has a very bad marriage, and he's actually been in love with his best friend since like he was a teenager, and his best friend is also in love with him. Like, they are not best friends, they are lovers, they should be together, but because of prejudice and because of fear, they've never been together. They both emigrated to England with their wives when they were younger, and they've basically been going behind their wives' backs this entire time, and now Barry is the only one left that's like out of the two that's still married. And we're following Barry as he tries to figure out what he wants to do. Does he finally want to come out to his wife and tell her like that he's leaving her and that he's leaving her for another man, that he wants a divorce, or does he want to kind of keep going with this like secret part of him? Is he ready to really reveal the true self like to the world? So yeah, there are parts of this that I really enjoyed, and there are parts of it that like I didn't enjoy so much. This is one that I definitely thought was going to be a 5-star read, and unfortunately it just didn't do it for me. I don't know if I was to read it again at a different time, like would it hit differently, I'm not sure. But yeah, Barry is definitely a fantastic character. He is someone who, if you met him in real life, he's someone that you would remember forever, even if you had a 5-minute conversation with him waiting for a bus. He's the type of person that you would always, like, the things he comes out with and his view on the world is just so funny and interesting, and like there's things that he says that are really like not particularly okay, and it can be quite misogynistic or quite like homophobic even, like at times. There's things he can say that you're a little bit like, ooh, okay, like shouldn't say that. The same way I'm sure a lot of people are like with their own grandparents, like things that could be said years ago cannot be said anymore, and you kind of have to remind the older people in your life sometimes that like that's not okay anymore. I kind of felt like that sometimes with Barry when I was reading this book. So I really liked him. I really loved the fact that we did get the perspective of his wife in this book, and we saw the type of life that she led for a very long time, and we see that she was never really treated well by Barry, and through his own, he kind of really like ill-used her in a way for a very long time, because you know, he was using her as kind of a cover and as a shield in a way, and she never really got the life that she should have gotten. She never got the love, she never got that like desire that she should have gotten in her husband, and I felt really sad for her. And I really like, I definitely understood some of the anger and some of the frustration that she puts out at Barry, because of the type of life that she's had to live for a very long time, like how betrayed she does feel and how like upset and frustrated she is about the life that she's had to lead. So yeah, I 100% understood a lot of her frustrations, and there were times I was very angry at Barry for the way he did treat her. The rest of their family are kind of shitholes though. So yeah, I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I did quite I enjoyed it. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to. The next book I read was a Regency romance, and that was The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. This is a female Regency romance. We're following Lucy and we are following Catherine, and Lucy is an astronomer and she's very, very clever, but she's always kind of all her work has always been credited to her father, because people always thought that like all of her calculations and all of her discoveries were actually him, where obviously it wasn't. And when her father dies, she has to basically look for work, but who is going to, you know, at the time no one would hire a female astronomer or believe that she could do the type of like mathematical calculations that like astronomers do, and because at the time people didn't think that women were able to do these things. She ends up getting employed by the Lady Catherine, and Lady Catherine is a widow, she's very wealthy, and she ends up bringing Lucy into her home and employing Lucy to write a book about like a particular astronomer. She's basically translating a French astronomer's book, and this book is just, it's really sweet, it's really fun. Regency romance, again, it's always a palette cleanser, and I just feel like this one was really, really nice, and I definitely recommend it for people who like the Regency romance genre. I really liked the fact that we, like in particular, because we were following 2 women, a lot of the time in Regency romance you have like a swashbuckler kind of male character who's very loud and brash and can be a little bit like borderline violent at times, and like reactions and stuff, where with this one we were following 2 women, and they're like, you know, a lot of the things that happened were a lot quieter, like a lot more muted, and the disagreement in this, that kind of like a miscommunication, kind of, there is a miscommunication disagreement at one point in this book that was a little bit frustrating, but I still liked how everything kind of came about. I loved, yeah, I really enjoyed the ending. I really liked the fact that I know the characters in the series, the next characters that we follow one of them briefly appeared in this book, and I definitely will follow on with the rest of the series and read as much as I can. Yeah, really enjoyed this one, so I gave it a 3.5, 4 stars. The next book I read was How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House by Cherie Jones. This is a book that was longlisted and shortlisted, I think, for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and that's why I really wanted to pick it up. This is set in Barbados. We are following a character called Lala on the night that she gives birth to her child, and at this time another woman on the other side in this island, she wakes up to a robbery going on in her house and her husband is shot dead, and we are following these two women as they are dealing with different things going on in their life and how Lala's story is connected to this other woman's story, and her name is Mira, and we are basically following Lala and Mira over the next few weeks as their stories kind of come closer and closer together. They're both dealing with different things, different traumas. Lala is dealing with a lot in her life. She has an abusive boyfriend, and she is like, there's a lot of like different warnings for like sexual assaults, domestic abuse, violence. I really enjoyed this one. I just really loved the setting. I loved kind of seeing, you know, you think of Barbados and you think of this like beautiful tropical island that you can go and visit, and like, you know, it's really touristy, and through Lala's eyes we're kind of seeing the other side of Barbados that, like, you know, like the posters won't want you to see. You're kind of seeing the poverty, and you're seeing how people are forced to live, the lack of education some people have, the effect of tourists on the region as well, and how that affects people's livelihoods in like loads of different ways. And I just thought Lala's like point of view was so beautiful and like so sad as well at the same time, because she's only like, she generally, like, what she's having to go through, you would think she's a much older woman, but I think she's actually like 18 or 19, so she's really only a child basically. And there's times where like her thinking and like the way she sees things or the way she thinks about things is so innocent. Like her baby throughout this whole book is called Baby, and there was just something about that really touched me, and I just felt like there was just such this innocence about calling your baby baby that like was so gorgeous and yet so sad at the same time. If you've read this book, you know. Yeah, so there's a lot of this like in this book that definitely really touched me, that I definitely really just enjoyed reading about. This is a very sad book. It's not one, if you want a light-hearted read, like, don't pick this book up, but the writing in this was gorgeous. I sometimes struggle with like what you would call, I guess, pidgin English. I sometimes struggle with that in books, and there is a lot of pidgin English in this book, but I did find I was able to follow along with it once I kind of got used to the flow of the way the writing was, and kind of I got to understand it. I was fine with it. So yeah, I definitely really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and yeah, I recommend people pick it up. The next book I read was Norwegian Woods by Murakami, and I picked this up for Lauren in the Books, her Patreon book club, which I'm a part of, and I really enjoyed every month, and this was the June book club pick. And this one we are following a character called Watanabe, and we are basically following his life. He's kind of looking back at his life, and we are seeing his relationship with his first love, what is her name, Nayoko, and we are kind of seeing what he thinks about like this girl he used to be in love with, and she was his first love, what happened to her, how she affected his life, and we're basically following him like in his early college years, and like the different girls that he has relationships with, and how this one girl is kind of like the big love that he feels she was the big love of his life. And this book is very much like just like how do I, like, he basically, it's just this guy talking about all these women who wanted to like have sex with him, and the girls he wanted to have sex with, and it's very like male gazy in a lot of ways. Like there was definitely like a lot of problematic moments in this book that I felt, in terms of like how all the women were like slightly, they felt like they were slightly, like all of them had like slight mental illness and were slightly, I don't know, like not hysterical, but like were always seemed to be on the verge of something, but they were so in love with him, and they were so mad at it. Like the things they would say about him, like, oh, you're so great, oh, the way you talk is so interesting, like the way you talk like in such an interesting way, and yeah, always like bigging him up. And I'm like, I don't think, like, girls don't really talk like that, like, you know, like you know, you do sometimes, but like not all the time. You don't act the way these girls acted around this guy all the time. And I did really enjoy the writing though. Like the story itself, I was a bit like, I don't know how I feel about this. There's also a lot of suicide in this book. Like there's so much like talk about suicide, and like characters who you find out end up killing themselves. Like, so yeah, if you are sensitive to the content of suicide, like just be careful picking this book up, because there is a lot. And I know this is because, you know, like Japan would have like a really big issue, particularly maybe around the time this book was written, with suicide, particularly in young people. And I do believe that's what probably Murakami was, he was kind of putting a focus on that in this book. But yeah, it was a little bit tough and a little bit like distressing at times to always know that all these characters like ended up like taking their own life. But I really enjoyed the writing, like the way the writing flowed. I was so stuck into the story. I really enjoyed it. So this one ended up being a 3 out of 5 stars, I think, for me, or 3.5. I really enjoyed the writing. The story I wasn't so mad about, but really loved the writing. I definitely want to pick up more by Murakami. So if you have particular recommendations by him that you would suggest, please leave them down below, because yeah, I definitely want to pick up more of his work, because I did, despite the weird story, I did actually really enjoy the writing. The next book I read was Dissolution by CJ Sansom. This is the first book in historical fiction / mystery series, where we are following a particular character. He is a hunchback character called, what is his name? Shardlake. We are following this character called Matthew Shardlake, and he is a lawyer, and he's basically set out, this kind of during the English Inquisition, so it's during the Tudor court, King Henry VIII, and we are following Matthew as he, or Shardlake as he's more known. We follow him to a monastery, this kind of remote monastery, where another lawyer who was working on the behalf of the king has been found dead in this monastery, and Shardlake is like sent to sort out the monastery, kind of tell them that they have to like pack up and like figure things out, because King Henry VIII obviously is like kicking them all out. This book was recommended to me by Victoria over at What Victoria Read. She recommended this one specifically to me in one of her videos a while ago, where she recommended books to booktubers, and she was definitely right recommending this to me, as I really enjoyed it. I just really love, like, I love reading about Tudor like history anyway. This is like a time within the reign of like Henry VIII that I haven't really read about before. The focus on the English Inquisition, I just found it a really interesting like point of history, I guess, to look at. And I really loved the main character, that is Shardlake. He is just such like an interesting character to follow. As I said, he was born with a hunchback, so it's something that like it kind of identifies him like to other people. You know, he is known as like the hunchback Shardlake, but also I really appreciated the fact that like he was written with this, I guess, disability, and we could see the way like it affected him, not just like in terms of like emotions and like how people reacted to him or how people treated him, or like flashbacks to when he was bullied as a child, but also like physically, like how he gets pain and he's sore, and there's times where like he needs like, you know, a staff to walk, and things that like affect like his everyday life. But I just found him a really earnest character, and he's a character that like is really good at heart, and someone who's actually like someone who just needs someone to like, you know, he's a little bit of like a cinnamon bun, like he actually just needs someone to like hug him at the end of the day, and someone to like look after him, and like he's just someone who just like needs like someone to love basically. And yeah, I just really felt for him, and I just thought he was a lovely character and a wonderful character, a really shrewd, smart character as well, brave. And yeah, I really loved reading about him, so I will definitely be continuing on with this series and reading the rest of the books. And I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book I read in June, this was also a audiobook for me, and that was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Now this book is a novel. It kind of reads as a memoir, but it is a novel book that is basically like one long letter from a son to a mother. His mother is illiterate. We are getting the perspective of a man called Little Dog, and he's talking to his mother about their experiences growing up in America, their experiences as Vietnamese immigrants, and he's talking about his mother and his grandmother, both of whom suffered from schizophrenia and mental illness, and talking to them about like their lives, their experiences of Vietnam, and then when they come to America, and his experiences as a Vietnamese immigrant, as a young child growing up in America, with family members who weren't really particularly good at English, and he had to say like translate for them, and then growing up, becoming like, you know, realizing he was a gay man, and then how he dealt with his identity as a gay Vietnamese man. And yeah, he just kind of talks about his experiences, his life experiences, his experiences living with his mother, but the whole thing is addressed to his mother. And it is extremely, like, really beautiful, really flowery, so much emotion in this book, and I did really enjoy listening to it. It was actually narrated by the author as well, which was lovely. The only thing I will say is I think I made a mistake in that I listen to this in audiobook. I think this is a book I would have appreciated a lot more reading it in physical form first, and then rereading it as an audiobook, and then getting like more things out of it from like the feeling, like hearing it being spoken. I definitely think I would have appreciated it more being it the other way around, because I think there were times with this book when I was walking that I don't think I was connected to parts of the book as much as I might have been if I'd been sitting down and reading it and 100% engaged with it rather than out walking. Just maybe not the type of book that I should be listening to. I should be like, there's other books that like are better for me in terms of audiobooks. This one maybe was not the right genre in terms of a first read on audiobook. So I definitely think I will read this when I will definitely reread this book at some point in the future. And I think if I reread it in physical format, I will actually enjoy it a lot more, because I did really appreciate the beauty of the writing, and I really liked the story, and I love the important messages that were in that story about like an immigrant's experience growing up in America. So I gave it a 3 stars, and I'm hoping that on a reread that will bump up to possibly a 4 stars, but I'll have to see when I eventually reread it. But for now it is a 3 out of 5 stars. So that's everything I read in June. This was a really long wrap up. I am so sorry. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will hopefully be back to regular scheduling at some point soon. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, please leave any comments or anything you want to talk about down below. I love to chat, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.